It is really my immense pleasure to be here with Adam Carolla, one of the pioneers of intellectual and creative independence in the entertainment industry. Some of you guys have probably listened to his podcast for years, and we've got something new that you're doing, and it's a movie, No Safe Spaces. So I'm not going to talk too much. We're going to roll the trailer, and then we're going to start a conversation.
There will be resistance, and it will not be peaceful. Resistance to violent hate speech is not another act of hate. It is an act of love.
Free speech is free on campuses unless you're hearing ideas you don't like.
It is ideological fascism. You must be one of us or you're unwelcome.
Do we need $600,000 of security to hear all of that?
The universities are so overwhelmed by this that I can't see how they can extract themselves from it.
We should probably pick cabins to do these speeches versus college campuses. We should go speak at the Unabomber shack.
This becomes tyrannical, man. You can't even make a joke without worrying about being crucified.
But isn't it spooky that we're having this discussion?
Are you testifying in front of Congress?
I am.
Why are you testifying? What have you done?
Do we get to keep these pads?
Whoever told you you only had to hear what didn't upset you?
I want every student on campus to be physically safe. But if you mean emotionally safe, I don't know why you're in college.
If you want to feel good, get a massage.
It's oppressor versus oppressed, and you're a hero if you're on the side of the oppressed.
Do not choose the side of the oppressor!
You cannot be happy if you think yourself a victim.
We don't agree with Mr. Prager's views at all.
We have common sense in common, and that means we have everything in common.
We're fighting for America, which is the greatest experiment in liberty and decency in human history. And I don't want to lose it.
When's the movie coming out again?
So, Adam, how do you go from all of the things you've done in the past, television, podcasting, entrepreneurial, all kinds of entrepreneurial stuff, to doing a free speech film with Dennis Prager?
Well, I've always been a fan of Dennis Prager. I hope everyone is a fan of Dennis Prager. I mean, he's a national treasure. He really is. And so, you know, I grew up in North Hollywood, and which should never be mistaken for Hollywood. It is another area altogether. And I used to be a carpenter, and I drove around my pickup truck, and I would listen to Dennis do Religion on the Line. And even though I was an atheist, I just sort of enjoyed him keeping me company and hearing his words. Later on in life, I got a little notoriety. He was always doing what he was doing. At some point, somebody introduced me to him. I knew him already for all those years. He had no idea who I was, and I always tell him that's just the way I pictured it. Yeah. You having no goddamn idea who I was. Like, I like that he doesn't know who Cardi B is, or Beyonce, or the Backstreet Boys. I'm glad that's the Dennis Prager I like. So we started talking, and it was love at first sight, and we did some speaking engagements around the country, and the next thing you know, a couple of producers came to us and said, do you want to do this movie with Dennis Prager? And I was like, if I can work with Dennis, we'll do it, and here we are.
Now, one of the things that struck me about the trailer is you had a little round table with several comedians, and you know, a lot of us in here have sort of faced the shame mobs and the shame campaigns, and it's really put a chill on a lot of political speech. Are you sensing? I mean, are you sensing in the world of comedy that people are beginning to wake up to the reality of the problem now?
Yeah, I think there's an element of the pendulum sort of swinging back the other way. You know, I always have this you know, as human beings, like I have this thought that, I'll take a little detour here, but there was like glam rock and all these bands and Cinderella and Quiet Riot and all the guys dressed like chicks with hair out to here and spandex and everything else. And that was the 80s, the late 80s. And then what came after that? Grunge rock. Mm-hmm. Like Kurt Cobain, a tattered shirt, you know, Seattle sound. Like, so what we do is we kind of go from here and we go, we've had enough of this. And then we swing hard. Mm-hmm. I mean, like you know, if you really just look at all this sort of hair metal, glam rock stuff of the later 80s and then the grunge, you know, Soundgarden and all this stuff, if you take a look at it just sort of aesthetically, it couldn't be further apart. Right. Musically, sonically, aesthetically, and it was like 4 years from, you know, 88 to 92, right? So I think if we go too far one way, and I think this is a good thing about this country and a good thing about being a human being, swing too hard that way, we'll go back the other way. So there's no doubt in my mind that the reason that the fastest growing sport is the UFC is the further we go toward safe spaces, the harder the rest of the country goes to the octagon.
Right. So what's really interesting to me about this film, and I'm not going to do too many spoilers on it because you have to see it. It's not just a bunch of talking heads talking about free speech. And what's counterintuitive is there's some elements in it that I think are different from what you might expect in a free speech movie. So I'm going to show another clip. And I'll come back with a question after that, but this is a clip that you would not expect to see in a movie about free speech. So if we could roll clip number 2.
This is the place I'd always kind of dreamt of when I was a kid. The houses I grew up in did not have garages, and I always wanted cars and go-karts and mini bikes, and I wanted a basketball hoop, I wanted a dog, I wanted dinner, I wanted a whole bunch of stuff. I found out very early what could happen to somebody if you got a free house, a couple of food tickets, and just a stipend from the government, that it was debilitating. My mom was never forced to go out and take care of business, and I said to her once, sort of from the mouth of babes, why don't you just get a job? You get a job, we'll have a car, we could have a nice car instead of a junker, we could get some furniture. And she said, if I get a job, I'll lose my welfare, meaning use your head, boy. And I thought at that point, I realized, not for me.
Okay, so that's a powerful clip on a lot of levels. I'm really curious as to the connection between that moment and what we just saw in the trailer of the battle against speech, the battle against the quest for safe spaces, and connect the dots there for me. I found that really interesting.
Well, first, there was some artistic license taken by the producer. We didn't have an upstairs. Upstairs was called the attic. There's no second story in the Carolla home. And the fancy jacket, a little rich for the Carolla's blood as well. So, but again, artistic license, I get it. You know, I grew up in that environment. I think there's a problem, and I think the problem is a lot of folks who aren't in this room grew up with a certain amount of privilege, and they have a certain amount of guilt because of that privilege, and they feel like they need to overcompensate in the other direction. I did not grow up in that world. I grew up in poverty and food stamps and welfare, and I saw that it was debilitating and hobbling. I saw what it did to people who wanted to work, but I understood that people took the path of least resistance, and if you gave them some food stamps and a stipend, just enough to get by on, they would say, I'll take that versus this other road, which could involve alarm clocks and showers and shaving and putting on deodorant and leaving the house and all sorts of exotic ideas, crazy exotic ideas. So I got it very early, and even though I was sort of in the belly of the beast, I still understood what was going on around me, and instead of being sort of indoctrinated into it, I pushed back against it and went, okay, this is never going to work. It doesn't work on the micro scale, sure as hell not going to work on a macro scale, and then I just went out into life. And how it pertains to the speech part is, if you can't take these ideas, like, if I can't take what I've learned from growing up in that environment, passing through working manual jobs and doing labor and, making $7 an hour digging ditches on a construction site and cleaning carpets for a living, if I can't get out to the light, to the end of that tunnel, where I'm an entrepreneur, where I'm making money, where I'm taking care of my family, where I'm paying my taxes, where I have employees, if I can't go through that journey and then share what I've learned with a bunch of young people, when other folks who grew up in a privileged environment, in a rich environment, are telling me to shut up,
right?
I don't want to live in that world. I don't want to live in that country. These people need to hear what I have to say because I passed all the way through it. And there's some guy with a silver spoon in his mouth who has some sort of white privilege guilt who's telling me to shut up, even though I didn't go through what he went through because he didn't go through jack squat.
Well, see, you just, I'm not as good at throwing to clips as like a Jimmy Kimmel, but you just absolutely perfectly set up the next clip.
He's dead to me.
You actually just perfectly set up the next clip, which we'll run that, and then I'll ask you the question I was going to ask, but you absolutely perfectly set that up. And the thing that I think is going to be potent about this is those of us who've been fighting in the free speech arena for years have been hearing this phrase, free speech is the weapon of the privileged against the powerless. It's the weapon of the powerful against the powerless. That's what free speech is, and you hear this all the time on college campuses. And with that in mind, let's do the next clip.
I got into a semi-heated debate with a black fella who was on public radio, and he went on to explain to me I didn't know what I was talking about because of my white privilege. And I said, well, let's examine my white privilege, may we? I did not go to college. I worked cleaning carpets. Later on, I worked on construction sites, not as an apprentice or a carpenter, but as a laborer, digging ditches, mostly cleaning up garbage, whatever work donkeys were qualified to do, that's what I did. At a certain point, when I felt like my white privilege wasn't kicking in at all, Mom was on food stamps and welfare. Dad was eking out a living and had no extra money or time for anybody else. I said, you know what would be a good job for me? Fireman. I'm strong, I'm eager for the fray, I have no qualms about my personal safety, and I think I would make a good fireman. Plus, I love chili, I love playing foosball, and as far as I could tell, when they're not putting out fires, they're eating chili and playing foosball. So I just walked over there and I said, I'm going to put in an application to be a fireman. And they said, fine. I filled it out. I handed it to the guy, and the guy said, don't hold your breath. And I said, what does that mean? And he said, we're not going to be getting to you for some years. And when you're 19 and you're destitute and your stepmom's trying to extricate you from the garage you're living in and you have no job or no real income, the notion of we'll call you in 6 or 7 years is not a buoy you cling to. And sure enough, I moved out of the house. I was about 25, 26, 5-6 years in my carpentry career. My dad showed up to my apartment one day and he had a letter. And he said, it's from the LA Fire Department. And sure enough, there was a date to take the written test the following weekend.
And I said, I don't even want to be a fireman anymore, but because I've waited 6 years to be a fireman, I'm going down to Hollywood High on 10 a.m. on Saturday. And I stood in line. There was a young lady, very diminutive lady, a small, slightly built lady behind me. Could not tell her nationality. Could have been black, Latino, or mixed, or something like that. Everyone around me, I kept saying, when did you put in your application? When did you put in? And I turned around to her and I said, when did you put in your application? And she said, Tuesday.
So you're just layered with privilege.
Yeah. That is a very sadly true story, yeah.
So I listened to your podcast, gosh, for years, and one of the interesting things about it, there's this concept that, this term that was coined by Barry Weiss in the New York Times is called the intellectual dark web. A lot of you guys have heard about this, and the intellectual dark web is made up of these people like Ben Shapiro and Jordan Peterson and others who have used their own independent platforms to say things that frankly, they wouldn't have an opportunity to say if they depended on someone else for their employment. They have exercised an enormous amount of intellectual independence to say things that resonate with people but are not politically correct. You were kind of intellectual dark web before the intellectual dark web. I remember in your podcast that you would have these riffs, just like you've kind of said today or tonight, and it seemed to really resonate with an awful lot of people beyond just the you're funny, your story has connected, or your ability to say things about the value of work connect with people. And it's really interesting. Is that something that has, I just look from the outside in, it was obvious to me. From sort of the inside out, were you seeing that connection you were having with people?
My sort of comedic approach is always just to say what I'm feeling, and it's sort of my job. So there's kind of two sides of comedy. There's, make people laugh, and then there's sort of make people think. And I always thought it was sort of my job to get people to think how I think, or at least understand how I think. So, when I used to be on K-Rock, KROQ radio in Los Angeles for a million years, and it was a big, powerful FM radio station, and they would play, so their demographic was sort of 15 and 16-year-old, like snowboarders from Orange County. And I would fly back from New York after doing Letterman or whatever, and I'd complain about first class. And then my program director would say, don't talk about flying first class. Don't talk about having money. Don't talk about driving a BMW. Don't talk about your house in Hills. The idea is to pretend like you're one of them. And my thing was what do you need me for then if I'm one of you? My plan is I'll be me, and I'm not going to brag about flying first class. I'm going to tell you how miserable I am in first class. So one day, if everything works out for you, you can be miserable in first class driving a BMW and living in the Hollywood Hills. So I've just always had a sort of authentic approach to it. I've never really thought, what do they want to hear? I've thought, what do I have to say? And my feeling is if I have something to say and you don't understand it, then I failed. But my job isn't, what do you want to hear? I'm going to say it. My job is, what do I want to say? And I need you to understand it. And again, I need to do it in a way that makes you go, I've never flown first class, but I understand it's miserable.
Right. So one of the interesting dynamics we've seen in this war over free speech and the culture of free speech, and how much are people going to be held responsible for the things they've said in the past, and is a bad joke a death sentence for a career? We were talking before tonight about the James Gunn saga with Disney, and this was the Guardians of the Galaxy director who had some 10-year-old tweets that were really bad. I'm not saying they were somewhat bad. They were really...
Hold on, he wasn't tweeting about 10-year-olds.
Yeah.
That you don't come back from. Yeah. These were 10-year-old tweets, not tweets about 10-year-olds. Let's be clear.
They were almost as bad as 10 tweets
about but you don't rebound from tweets about 10-year-olds.
So he got outed on Twitter and was within 24 to 48 hours just ditched from this multi-billion-dollar movie franchise, and now was recently kind of quietly brought back. And I was wondering, do you think that moment when all of sort of that progressive anger of Hollywood, which often projects out into the rest of the country, got flipped inward on them, is that a turning point in any way, or is the climate still so frightened and people are still so scared that it's not going to make much of a difference?
Yeah, people are scared to some degree, and sort of rightfully so. It's kind of a funny thing. It's interesting sort of navigating Hollywood, because you say a few things and then people around you say, you're going to ruin your career. And it's like, well, that's an interesting statement. I'm going to ruin my career because I'm expressing my feelings? And then what do you mean I'm going to ruin my career? You mean you asswipes are going to ruin my career? Like, I'm not ruining my career. I'm talking.
Yeah.
I'm giving you my feelings on school choice. You guys are going to ruin my career. So they shouldn't say you're going to ruin your career. They should say we're going to ruin your career. I do feel like, and I told Tucker Carlson as much a few months ago when we were doing an interview with Dennis Prager and myself, which is the answer to all this is stop apologizing and just stop it. Just moving on. Not going to get it. Because these guys, first off, no one is really upset. Like, nobody really has their nose out of joint or their panties in a bunch. I don't know how, or whatever's in between your nose and your panties. Your esophagus is way out of place. Nobody really cares. They're just virtue signaling. So the second you go, all right, you want me to apologize? Good, screw you, I'm moving on. Then they sort of back off and they go somewhere else. They're sort of, basically, they're like feral cats who are walking around the neighborhood. If you put a saucer of milk out, that's your apology. They'll come to your back porch. And they'll say, oh no, as soon as we're done with this saucer of milk, we won't come back again. But oh, if you put that saucer of milk out, they'll be back, and they'll be back with their friends. No milk, no saucer, no light, no porch, and they stop coming around.
Well, you know, the way this works is, I mean,
Thank you, extra clapper. There's always one extra clapper. Like, it starts a little early, hits a little hard, stays a little late. Extra clapper guy, thank you. He agrees with me a little bit more than you guys do. Extra clapper guy.
So you have these interns who are searching and searching for things, and when they find something offensive, it's not like they start weeping. They're not so sad and offended. They're happy. And
right.
It seems like about 19 times out of 20, 99 times out of 100, the words "I'm offended" are a flat-out lie.
Yeah, I always sort of, I tried to kind of drill down on this with Dr. Drew, who I've sat next to for many years, and I think what I just sort of keep coming back to is all roads lead to narcissism. Everything, thank you, extra talker. Extra talker, extra clapper, extra clapper. She's sitting alone. I feel like you could find some love with extra talker and extra clapper. Yeah, oh, she's right, he's right, you guys are... You should be with extra clapper, extra talker. Yes, everything you do, like when in doubt, just check the narcissism box, because it's all about narcissism. It's all that we're seeing, all that we're experiencing, all that we're imbibing is all about narcissism. It's like everyone trying to jump on and virtue signal. And you know, it's something that we used to sort of fight against. You know, I liken it to this, which is, in the past, if you were dating somebody and that somebody dumped you, and then 8 months later you're at some cocktail party and you run into them and they're with their new boyfriend, and you then walk back to your car with your friend, you want to go, oh, that puss. Oh, my God, that guy. Weak genes, horrible constitution. That guy, I hate that guy. but you would sort of hold your head up and go, I'm glad Sharon's happy. I wish them the best. That was then.
Yeah.
Now it's like, let's go key that guy's car. And that's not our best selves.
Yeah.
Our impulse is, let's go key that guy's car, but our best selves is, I wish them well. We're not that.
No.
We used to be that, and we've sort of devolved into, let's go get his car.
Yeah. So do we want to take a couple of questions?
Sure.
All right, let's
Extra clapper guy, extra talking gal. I feel like they're
all
one
right,
of
let's see, first hand that I can see. I know there's a question out there. Yes, ma'am. And I'll repeat it back. She doesn't have a microphone. Or here comes a microphone. Hold on. Hold on. Right here. Yes.
So to segue from what you just said, are we still a center-right country? Or are we just indulging our impulse to be rude?
The center right, are we still a center right country? Back to Dennis Prager, something that I always think about when he says, I wish the Jews would preach what they practice, which is they live their life in a very conservative way, education, family, religion, focus on all the things we focus on, all things we know are important, sort of bedrocks of the foundation of our society, and then they go vote Democrat, right? So they're living this life and they're voting this life. I sort of think Bruce Jenner, circa 1985, everyone sees you on a Wheatie box, but you're over here in a negligee. So if you really think about this country, like everything we stand for, everything we want for our children, like think about all the stuff you tell your kids, be honest and work hard and no shortcuts and do your homework and all that stuff. On paper, we're center right. When you turn on the news, we're hard U-turn left. But I think that's more the news and less of what's going on in average families, because average families are always about family, education. I mean, you strive. You don't always attain the goal, but you strive for the things that we stand for here, right?
All right, another question. All right, we have one right back here.
Mr. Carolla, I was raised in Wisconsin. I went to the University of Wisconsin, the People's
Go
Republic
Badgers.
of Wisconsin. Woo!
Yeah.
My bracket is shot. For what it's worth, when I was looking at the film, I have 3 young sons, and I was looking at this young guy. Your lip-syncing ability was uncanny, by the way. I'm wondering, when you look at this youthful group of people, how do you entice this group of young people? Because as a mother of 3 young sons, I'm somewhere between where you were portrayed in that place and the silver spoon, and I feel like the conservative movement has a responsibility to cater to these kids. How do we do that? How do we connect with them, and how do we get there without pandering to them and patronizing in sort of an overly prodigious way and making them feel like they're dumb?
It's interesting because, the thing about kids is if you sort of try to train them like a vine to go a direction, they'll just go the other direction. But if you see vines or trees or shrubbery, they'll sort of move toward the sunlight. So I think the idea is to kind of be the sunlight and less the rope. If you try to sort of use the twine and pull them a direction, they're not going. I have a 12-year-old son, and he listens to Dennis Prager and Ben Shapiro and folks like that, and he's trying to hear the truth. He's trying to hear what makes sense. He's trying to hear logic. I think that people have a natural sort of pull toward logic, like the plants pull toward the sun, and the push away from logic is a kind of a move into the shadows, and it's not really natural. And maybe this is overly optimistic, but I do think that, like the truth when you hear it, I think the idea is probably not to try to push people, but to just sort of sit back and produce the sunlight and let them move toward the new dawn. Thank you. Thank you very much. I thought it was come on, applause guy. This guy's sitting on his hands. Like, I'm a number one applause guy over here. I just dropped the new dawn, and he's like scratching his ass, like leaning back, like the bloom's off the rose.
Right here.
Mr. Carolla, first, everybody here, once you see this film, go see The Hammer, 2005. A really great film.
Another film I'm in, right.
A great film.
Thank you.
And it's your life story in many ways.
Yes, thank you.
So you talked about logic. And one of the problems with those of us that talk about logic and try to win arguments by logic was we run into, you don't know how I feel. I feel this way.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about logic. You need to acknowledge my feelings. Don't white-splain this to me. Don't mansplain this to me. Don't straight-splain this to me.
Right.
How do you deal with that?
There's a phenomenon of you can't argue with my feelings, or like in my heart, I know what's going on. Like in your heart, you have plaque. That's all you have in your heart. It's a buildup of plaque. This notion of I had this very interesting exchange, and I felt this one coming on it was about 3 years ago. So I have boy-girl twins, 12 now. They're probably 9. They were heading out to the garage, getting ready to get in the car and go to school. And my daughter was upset with me, and I don't know why, probably just dropped a little truth bomb on her or something like that. And they were getting in the car, and she was angry, and she was saying, just apologize, you hurt my feelings. And I said, I'm not going to apologize because I don't need to apologize, and it wasn't meant to hurt you. And my wife sort of chimed in, and she said, look, if her feelings are hurt, then those are her feelings, and you can't deny her feelings. Those are that's the way she feels. You need to apologize. And I said, no, I do not. Her feelings are wrong. It's a delightful way to head off to school. But I was like, no, I'm not. I'm like standing in the garage. I think my wife probably thought about putting it in drive and just ramming me. But I literally got in this argument in my garage 3.5 years ago with my 9-year-old. I was like, I don't care about your feelings. Your feelings are wrong. Just because you feel this way doesn't make it valid, doesn't make you right. I'm smart, I'm old, I'm rich, I worked hard. You don't get to have your feelings trump me as a 9-year-old. Thank you, agree lady. Hey, clap guy, agree lady is verbal agree ladies, beating you to the punch. And all we can do, look, we have to push back, because my wife was doing this thing where she's like, that's the way she feels, so it's scientific. Check the chart. She's the winner. And I was like, I'm not signing off on that fake science. So it's essentially you have to tell 9-year-olds and 39-year-olds and 69-year-olds and 59-year-olds how to feel and how to think. The only thing we can do is push back against it. That's what I did. But look, I don't look at myself as a bad dad or argumentative. I'm just saying, here's how it is. That's what it is. There is a reality. I would hope that you look at yourself as doctors who are simply explaining, here's the results of what I saw when I looked at your x-rays. Not nice doctor, not good vibes doctor, not feel good doctor, just here, I looked at your CAT scan, here's what I saw.
Yeah. So let's do another question, and then we've got a really interesting clip after that. So one more question. All right, they're all the way in the back.
So how did sleeping in the garage for 3 months go after that?
I literally just took my pack. I just bivouacked right there in the garage. It was a funny. It was kind of a weird conversation with my wife screaming, that's the way she feels. You must obey. And I was like, screw that. I'm not down with that. But listen, the difference between me and many other people is I didn't go to college. I didn't have parents with money. I didn't have bosses who liked me. I slept on futons with other dudes, mostly non-sexual manner. I've been through it all, so please don't tell me my opinions.
All right, we've got a clip here with Jordan Peterson that I think is really, really interesting and actually connects with the title of the movie, No Safe Spaces, in a fascinating way. So let's roll that last of our clips.
Who would have thought that the rise of cage fighting and safe spaces would take off with the same kind of trajectory?
Right. I think that those things are linked.
It's the fastest growing sport for a reason.
Yeah, well, and it's funny too, because it's also a consequence of the sanitization of boxing. Oh, boxing's too dangerous.
Right.
Let's make it safe. It's like, okay, fine, to hell with boxing. Let's have mixed martial arts. Because actually we don't want safe at all. In fact, safe is the danger. So look, in the story of Hansel and Gretel, right? The kids are lost in the forest. Okay, so now you're a kid, you're out in the forest. What do you want? You want a gingerbread house, because you need a bloody house. And if it's made out of candy, so much the better. Now, the problem with that is obviously it's too good to be true.
Right.
So what's inside the gingerbread house? Well, that's the mother that fattens you up to eat you. That's the overprotective soul. It's like all sweetness and light on the outside and devouring witch on the inside. And so when you try to make people too safe, all you do is emasculate them. You castrate them, like symbolically speaking.
Wow.
So, the thing about Jordan Peterson is he really hides the ball. But one thing about that I thought was interesting was how safety is dangerous. The quest for safety itself is dangerous. And I thought that was a fascinating explanation of how the quest for safety itself can devour us. And that's what we're seeing happening on the college campuses.
Yeah, we need, I always say this, but we need gravity. I mean, you think about the bottom of your feet, and you think about the calluses, or you think about your hands and your fingers, and you think about the calluses, and you sort of think about like picking up a hot mug of coffee with your hands versus putting it on the soft, flabby flesh underneath your underarm. Like, you think about what that would feel like in different spots of your body, right? And so you go, well, I understand your hands are used and they have calluses and they're used to working in the bottom of your feet. I mean, think about what if the soles of your feet were just covered with the flesh that's on your belly or on your underarms. Like, it'd be brutal just getting up in the morning, getting out of bed and walking down the stairs, which my house didn't have, producers. So you have these sort of calluses and you have thicker skin in different areas, and then it serves you. It serves you to have this. Otherwise, it'd be like, oh my God, this is so cold. I mean, like, I have a glass filled with ice cubes. If you're pushing this against my side, I'd be screaming in agony instead of enjoying the sweet, sweet taste of vodka in front of you. So, obviously, everyone needs that. It's a rite of passage, male, female, and I always sort of use the analogy, which is, when they send the astronauts up to the space station for 9 months, they worry about bone density loss, muscle loss. They have to work out ways because they're living in a zero gravity environment. And if you guys hang around in a zero gravity environment, if we all just sort of floated around in a zero gravity environment for 3 weeks, we'd be morbidly obese and hate our government, right? So the gravity sort of, that you get up every day, you get up and you literally go like, all right, I'm pushing against gravity. Like, everything you do is a push against gravity. And if you want to try to remove the gravity on campuses when you need the most gravity, Like I don't, I'm 54, I don't need as much gravity as I needed when I was 18, 19, or 20. You need that gravity at that age, and we're removing the gravity at that age so your bones don't develop and your muscles don't develop. And now, when you're done living in that bouncy castle of zero gravity, we then push you out into the workforce, you're doomed to fail.
Well, it seems that, in some places, though, they're going to say a Google or a Facebook, and they're changing, Google and Facebook isn't changing them, they're changing Google and Facebook and turning a lot of our corporate spaces and our public spaces into the same kind of space they transform college into.
Well, somebody figured if you're going to leave the zero gravity bouncy castle, you better move quickly into another zero gravity bouncy castle. Yeah. If you go into Thunderdome, you're going to get smeared by Mel Gibson or. So Google set up another bouncy castle. Yeah. That's essentially what it is. And when you hear guys like James Damore, those guys, write their letters to Google, they have interrupted the bouncy castle that is Google, or you pick the Silicon Valley company.
Yeah. Well, let's take a couple more questions before we call it a night. So there's other hands up there. Okay, we've got the most loud talker of the night has her hand up. Try to use a inside voice talking into the microphone.
She doesn't need a microphone. Hey.
Big fan of David Prager, as always. Big fan of you. So, what do we do? What do we do as normal people to remind everybody about the Constitution and about the Second Amendment? First Amendment and the Second Amendment.
So what do we do what do we tell everyday Americans who are making a living how to defend the First Amendment?
I don't think you can really tell people things. I just think you do people things. Like you just get to work, you pay your taxes, you take care of your family, take care of your community. Like you just go, do as I do and forget the say part. I just live by example. What could be better than an example?
Well, here because we live by example.
Well, let's get the next question.
Well, I just think you're gonna preaching is fine, but doing is sort of better. Like and also having success is sort of it's the best revenge, as they say, which is like, okay, you poison your kids, you freak out your kids, you tell your kids we live in a country that hates them and there's a target on their back, and we keep saying 12 years, but it's 11 years and 10 and a half months. Like it's come on, the clock's ticking, everybody. So you poison your kids. I'll love my kids and tell them this is the greatest country in the world and they can do whatever they want. And then you come find me in a few years and tell me how everyone's doing. Like, just go out and do it.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've got microphones back here.
Hey, Adam.
Hey.
Growing up, I was a big fan of The Man Show. And
thank you.
It seems like kind of the cultural attitude towards The Man Show has shifted, and some people claiming that some of your bits were inappropriate. And also your co-host, of course, Jimmy, has taken a very different attitude towards political correctness. So just generally wondering your thoughts on that.
I think, and I get it. I mean, look, not that this was that, but, in terms of, I was watching I was telling everyone to check out a Saturday Night Live SNL sketch from many years ago. And it was an old Buck Henry bit where he played Uncle Roy. And he was a pervert. And he was trying to get Gilda Radner to like pull her nightgown up over her head. Like, it was insane. So certain things you see are insane from back in the day, or they seem insane. I stand by the Man Show. But Dennis Prager, who we brought up a couple of times, brings up some interesting things, which is he says judge a man in his day. Basically, the Bible says that, which is not today's day. But, you know, someone had a grandma who said Negro and not African American, but we can't judge her because that's what they said. Now we're building this weird time machine where we want to go back and prosecute her for saying what people said back in the day with founding fathers, slavery, everything else, statues, everything else, yearbooks, everything else. You know, Jimmy and I are as good of friends as we were many years ago and remain great friends. And part of the reason we're great friends is because he knows I'm a good person and I know he's a good person. And we get together and we enjoy barbecue and watch the Super Bowl. Like, there's a version of this country where people may have some disagreement politically, but still understand we're all Americans, we're all good people, and we all love our kids, and we just get together and enjoy ourselves without the judging or the ostracizing or the you got to go to a gulag. I live in Hollywood. You know, half the people I'm around, I differ with politically, but I still like them as human beings, and they still like me as a human being. And God willing, we just get on with it.
All right, one last question.
Come on, clapper guy.
Yeah.
I did that whole soliloquy for you, and you're like, oh, man, my hands are tired. If I didn't have this belly skin on my hands, it wouldn't be so painful, but that analogy made me, sorry.
I wanted to get some thoughts from you, or have you develop them a little bit on the issue of leadership around all this. And just to relate quickly, I served as a university trustee for a number of years and tried to address this within an organization. And one of the most frustrating things was that the administration, it was hopeless to try to get them to move on this. And then the faculty, who should be modeling good behavior for the young people, also did not want to embrace any sort of leadership role which involved doing hard stuff. And I know on your show sometimes you talked about that with regard to politics. You know, like, well, it's great, you know, they're doing something about changing a holiday or whatever, but let's try to fix something, and it's not happening. Maybe you have some thoughts about that as well, or what, maybe how we could demand more of leaders. I'm just curious.
Well, so when it's interesting. I've never had this thought before, but you know, I've always sort of joked, and I said it in front of Congress when I was in the movie, which is, you know, kids may be our future, but we're the present, and they're not now. They're the future, like Whitney Houston said, but we're here now. Like, I have 12-year-old twins. They may be the future, but I make the decisions now. Because they're not the present, they're the future. I'm the present, we're the present. And these kids on these high school campuses, emotionally, which are probably as mature as 12-year-olds were back in the 40s when they were going to try to sign up to, you know, fight the Nazis and the Japanese, these kids are not the present, they're the future, and we need to mold them. And so the faculty and the administration can't look at them as customers and clients. They have to look at them as kids, not clients, kids. It's alliteration, but it's different letters. But it still kind of works, you know what I'm saying? For Clapper guy, not clients, kids. Okay, so you're seeing this in politics now. Like, you see a lot of politicians that are looking at these people as clients instead of Americans. Like, hey, who wants free healthcare? Who wants free college? Who wants free every goddamn thing? Oh, my clients do. Like, so it's a very slippery slope to go, these are clients and not kids, or these are clients and not Americans. And we're getting into that realm, and it's a little bit frightening. And so the kids are just kids. They're misguided. They grew up in coddled families. They made their way, from one bouncy castle to another bouncy castle. I don't blame them. They're making bad decisions. Listen, I have a dog. His name is Phil. He's a Labrador. He's 110 pounds. He makes bad decisions all day, all day, all day. And we don't blame Phil. I blame my wife. And she blames me. And rightfully so, because we made bad decisions with Phil. Phil's a pile of crap. Like, you walk Phil, and it's like he's trying to water ski a different direction the boat's going, and it's a fight. And every time I go, God damn, this dog doesn't know anything. Like, she goes, because we didn't do a job. We didn't do a good job. We ruined the dog. It's our fault. You understand? And the faculty, the administration, all the people on that side of the ledger need to understand that those kids are Phil, my lab, and they need to train that goddamn dog. Sorry for using the Lord's name in vain, but clap. Go ahead. Thank you.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank our sponsor for the Night Owl sponsor, Alan Sidor, and thank you to Adam. This has been a tremendous night. Thank you all for coming.